Dant Crossing, Gethsemane, Kentucky. Timeless hospitality that stirs the spirit. Dant Crossing is a one-of-a-kind destination for unforgettable weddings, memorable corporate events, day trips, and weekend getaways. The pastoral campus is anchored by Log Still Distillery and includes an amphitheater that seats 2,000, a 12-acre lake for fishing and unique lodging options, creating an immersive experience that's rooted in the community and culture of our little slice of Kentucky. More attractions will open soon at Dant Crossing, including our 21,000 square foot distillery, which we will have the ability to produce 15,000 barrels of spirit each year, a network of wooded walking trails, fully functional private train depot, farm-to-table restaurant, and the Legacy, a premier wedding and events venue. Whether you're looking to host an event, book a stay, or reserve a tasting, we're ready to welcome you. Learn more at dantcrossing.com.
We're recording and it's in progress. We haven't started the podcast. This is the YouTube part of it, but welcome to the prequel to the podcast. We have the alchemist Alan Bishop and Xavier here with myself, Tiny. So tonight it's going to be wild.
Isn't that a shocker?
Well played.
Yeah, it's a shocker.
Double shot, rare double shocker, where you get arthritis.
Wait, okay, so I'll give it just that way, right?
Yes. That is Maddie and her girls for the right price. That's what that is.
There you go.
So
you saw the shocker I did with oh my god, what was the Jason? What Michael Myers from?
Yeah, with Tyler fucking Maine, dude. I got. When I saw that, I literally, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I had to call my wife and I was like, fucking Muller did the shocker with Michael fucking Myers from the Rob Zombie Halloween movie. She goes, nuh-uh. And I'm like, get up and come here. Let me show you. I'm so excited, totally, man.
Fucking cool too, man. And I don't think he gave a shit. I mean, he's doing a lot of other shit, but I can't wait till his show comes out. He's going around. The reason why he was at that for Luca Mariano is they were talking about he hosts a liquor show that's going to be, I should think it's getting close to airing on Netflix. So that's going to be pretty fucking cool.
Well, what a missed opportunity in the world, and hopefully his people are working on this. And I don't know if you guys are comic book guys or not, but I grew up a comic book dork, and he played Sabretooth in that first X-Men movie. Yep. Of course, he had no real lines or anything, but what a great R-rated Marvel movie that could be with him as Sabretooth in his most, feral, sort of almost not human anymore form, right? I'd buy that ticket all day long.
Yeah, it's Marvel and Disney now, so who knows what the fuck they're doing anymore. They're doing an all right job. I'm not going to sit there. We watched. Have you seen the Eternals?
I have not watched that yet. I've not been able to bring myself to watch it yet.
It was doable. It was, right. You didn't walk away. That's the greatest. But it's kind of like when I was a huge Marvel Spider-Man comic book kid. I mean, yep. My worst moment in my life is when I was 10 years old. So that puts me in 1974. And I was sick, and my dad took me to downtown Milwaukee to work because he had to take me to work because I was sick, couldn't go to school. My mom couldn't take me. So at lunchtime, we went to the bookstore downtown and they had comic books. And I held in my hand the number 2 Spider-Man, not the number 1, not the premiere-ish, but the number 2. And it was $75. And I said to my dad, can I get this? But 1974 or 3, whatever, you're 90, whatever, 90.
It was like about $400.
Yeah, $75. I think my dad paid $5,600 for his X19 Fiat. So, that's a shit ton of money for him. And he said no, but if he would have said yes.
Right. Well, it's funny. I grew up a huge comic book dork, and growing up in the middle of nowhere in Indiana, not a whole lot of comic shops, right? And so I can remember the handful of times that I got to go to Great Escape in Louisville, which was, I don't even know if they're still around, but that was like the place to go for comics, right? And they had everything. And I was excited to see, you know, because I bought Wizard magazine where you could price everything out and all that stuff, even though I didn't have any of that stuff. I was as excited to see the actual comics behind the counter where you can't even touch them or read them and be like, oh, that's the first appearance of, right? And one of the greatest gifts I ever got, and I still got it to this day. And off the top of my head, I cannot remember the issue, what the number is, but I do have the very first appearance of the Hobgoblin in Amazing Spider-Man. My mom and dad bought it for me for my birthday when I was 11. And it was, at that time, it was $40-something, right? And my dad, you've seen my dad, I'm sure, at some point. You can imagine my dad's reaction to somebody paying $40 for fucking pulp paper, fucking, you know, like, this is all you're getting. Don't ask for anything else. Are you sure you want this piece of paper? And I was like, I want it so fucking bad, right? And so I still have that to this day. And that's probably, you know, Kim and I were actually looking today, you know, it's comic books have become a good investment again, surprisingly, because of the movies, right?
Also,
so we're
COVID.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. 100%. And, you know, just in general, just looking at what the prices are and how it's graded. And this comic's probably an 8.5, maybe an 8.6, somewhere in there. You know, it's high enough quality that I should have it graded and actually cleaned and pressed and all that fun stuff. And I don't want to, you know why? Because the first thing I did when I got that comic book, I ripped it out of that fucking plastic and I read that motherfucker. Right. That just like whiskey. That's what it's made for, consumption.
Right.
We cracked open a signed bottle this weekend, as a matter of fact, Jeff and I.
Yeah, for sure. And it was that's one of the things that I just wanted to ask you. It's kind of like the difference between, like, you guys have your single barrel program, right? The difference between when it goes from they pick the barrel to what you put in the bottle and then what it tastes like, the difference. And I was part of the Luca Mariano pick for this Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and it was a whole big extravaganza kind of thing. And some people weren't happy with the pick. They weren't happy with as much as that I thought. And I thought the whiskey was good. It wasn't great, but we opened that bottle this weekend, right? And it's sitting on the table, signed by Francesco. It's insane. I got French toast and butter and syrup.
If I'd have paid $300 for that bottle, I wouldn't have been upset about it.
I mean,
really good.
How does, when you do a barrel pick, it go from what you were tasting on the barrel pick, the single barrel that we were picking, their single barrel select, to in the bottle changing? How can that happen?
So that's actually, and you guys are, and this is why I love you guys. You guys are the first people to ever actually ask that question. And that is more common than people will ever realize. And there's multiple reasons for it, right? So first of all, depending on when you come pick that barrel, what part of the year is it, right? If it's in the heat of the summer, right, and it doesn't get bottled until that fall, there's going to be a change, right? Because that whiskey is contracting, it's coming back out of the barrel, things are changing. Some of the things that were stuck in the wood that you didn't want are coming back into the barrel. If it's in the wintertime, that whiskey's contracted and it's holding on to all those weird, funky things that normally you'd want to get out of it, and it doesn't get bottled till it warms back up, things are going to change. So we've had this issue before. I've only ever heard of it one time with us so far. Now, I'm sure there's somebody watching this who'll be like, I had one of your whiskey picks and it must have, this was the quote that I got from this person. It turned in the barrel, which I will say, again, saying that this is entirely possible. I'd send the barrel or bottle my picks so quickly, even if the company is slow to get them out because they have to get labels, etc., that the chances of it turning in the barrel are about slim and fucking none. So we made the joke whenever we picked the next barrel for this particular group, and I won't name the group because I love them and they're awesome, short of this one person. We took a picture of it because it was a set of barrels that we had taken up to the dunnage style warehouse, which is off site. And when we take those up there, we actually strap the barrels down so that they don't, roll off during transport and all that stuff. Sure. And so the leader of this particular group took a picture to take and send to this one particular person and say, look, we strapped it the fuck down. There's no way it turned in the barrel, right? But it does happen.
What?
It is a thing. It is a thing.
Yes, I could see it changing. But okay, you're picking a barrel that's 5 years old. There's no fucking way it's turning. It might turn for the fucking better. I mean, but it ain't turning for the worse.
You would be surprised, man. I'm telling you, there are times. Let's take, for example, right now, if you guys came to the distillery for a barrel pick, and we've had some people in recently, and they were on short order for a bourbon festival. So now's the only time they had to do a pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff they picked was 5 years, coming up on 6 years. And if I don't get it out of that barrel right now in this cold weather, and the cold weather is the worst time short of the hottest part of the year to pick a barrel. If I don't get it out of there before barometric pressure changes and storm fronts start coming through in the spring, that whiskey will be night and day. The worst time anybody can ever go pick a barrel is the coldest part of the year or the hottest part of the year, especially with pot distilled spirits. Those are the worst two times that you can go pick a barrel, because the barrels are not showing. Like right now, literally, guys, I don't care how many distributors would have won it. If we ran out of Lee Sinclair, right, which we do often because it sells so well, I don't care how bad distributors want it. I won't dump it January, February, and early March. I refuse to dump barrels in those 3 months for bulk product because it's not showing right. Like if you go with me right now to go taste those barrels, I'll tell you right now, everything tastes like shit. It all tastes like shit, and it's going to taste like shit until it warms up.
So even if you get, like, you find a honey barrel and you put that aside, and that you found that in the middle of fall when the temperature was, in Indiana, like the right temperature, when it hits into the winter time, it's going to change its flavor. And then when it goes to spring, it's always going to be changing its flavor, is what you're saying.
Constantly, because think of it like this, right? So, and we've talked about this before, the difference between char and toast and where does your flavor come from? Your flavor actually comes from the toast of the barrel, okay? The char is literally there as a filtration device. Now, that's a beautiful thing. It's utilitarian, right? But what also happens? Everything you filter out is stuck in that char, and it's still soluble, right? So everything you filtered out in year 1 is still in that wood at year 5. And when that whiskey gets cold and it contracts and it pulls back out of that barrel, what's it bring with it? All that funky shit that you didn't want, right? And when it warms back up and it gets super hot,
goes back.
What does it also do? It pushes everything you might also want, plus the shit you don't want, back into the barrel. Barrels are legitimately fantastic ingredients and very shitty storage devices. That's really what they are. And they are in some ways living, right? They're breathing, they're moving, they're interacting with air, they're interacting with environment, all those things. And just like you have shitty days and I have shitty days, those barrels have shitty days, and sometimes they have shitty months.
So overall, if you look at that and you're, as a distiller, you understand that sometimes it's let's just say it's at 5 years and it's in the winter time and it's all back in there and you taste it and it's shit. You'll just wait a little bit longer for the stuff to go back into the, maybe filter out some, even though, and now when you're talking about like Pappy 23, I mean, yes, you've lost so much is still in the barrel. I mean, and so much has been evaporated, but that's a hit or miss, I guess. It's just like,
100%. Yeah.
I mean, if all the shit was in there and it's still in there and it didn't get filtered out, it's going to taste like crap, right?
It can. Absolutely. There's also, there's several things happening there, and barrel maturation is a very complex issue. Obviously, you have esterification, you have micro-oxidization, you have all of those things coming into play. But there's also a law of diminishing returns as well, right? Not only in volume, obviously the obvious shit, But the law of diminishing returns with pot still distillate is different than with column still distillate. Column still distillate is almost always barrel centric. Pot still distillate is almost always raw material centric. And if you want to hold on to those positive attributes of pot stilled whiskey or pot stilled brandy, whatever you're dealing with, right, there's only so far, especially in a climate that's as dramatic as honestly Indiana and Kentucky is, right? There's a lot of ups and downs in Indiana and Kentucky. Ohio as well. Yes. There is a law of diminishing returns if you want some of those positive attributes of that raw material too. So not only are you, if you go in the winter months, getting some of those negative aspects that you wanted to filter out, and you can wait until the next cycle comes, and maybe that's good or it's bad. Maybe it's good in that now that whiskey is more barrel driven, for lack of any better word, smoother, rounder, right? All the middle of the road fucking Phil Collins music bullshit, right? That's what that is. But maybe also now it's lost because you've waited too long. Now it's lost a little of that feistiness that reminds you of what the raw material is. Some of that aromatic component, especially say, for example, with apple brandy or something like oats or buckwheat, where it's a little more volatile. It's lost those components of what that grain was when it was ripe in the field and could be used that following winter, et cetera, right? So there is a law of diminishing returns there. So there are far more opportunities in maturation to fuck up badly than there are in the entire rest of the process of distillation if you are halfway intelligent. That is legitimately the best way to put it. There's too many opportunities just to be like,
well, that's why the big distilleries have an advantage, because they have so much distillate that they can cover up their fuck ups and stay with but also when you're talking about like a Jim Beam or whatever, you're talking about a very one-dimensional good tasting whiskey. You're not talking about a multi-dimensional, lots of different flavors coming from everywhere, but that's just like you said, that's the industry. But we should get going to start this podcast now, because then on the podcast we'll be missing out, We'll
be like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know.
So I will start recording right now, and then we are going to play Little Steve-O's version of After You Talk. Also, just right before, if you could talk to your people, have you done any more narrating of ads?
I have not, but if you need a new ad, I can talk to my people and we can make that happen. Now, I will tell you that I hate my ads, so I've never actually listened to them. But if you like them, then I'm more than willing to do whatever you want to do.
I would be willing to do some voiceover for you if you think my voice is good. If you don't, disregard.
Listen, your voice is making me hard right now. I mean,
that's a little bit too much information, but I'll take it with the spirit.
Your ads blow mine away, and it's just like. But I did take your advice. I'm sitting there trying to do the voice. I'm trying to do the recordings for because I've got this professional thing from you guys, right? And then I'm trying to do it for. I didn't get it from Log Still, and I didn't get it from Watershed, so I try and do my own, and I'm doing it straight, right? And I don't know how many times straight. I'm like, so I'm going to fuck it. I'm just going to do what Alan did. I'm just going to get fucked up. And by the time I was fucked up, that's the one I used. So.
Yep. Yeah, you have to. There's two tricks to it. You got to be fucked up. Well, three tricks. You got to be fucked up. You got to have good audio software, which I don't have here. I go to a radio station.
Right.
And then you have to have a guy who is the MacGyver of recording, who can be like, record this 20 fucking times. And then he coaches you while he's standing a foot away from you. And he goes, after the 20th time, you don't get it. He's like, that's all right. We can put this shit together and make it cohesive. And I'm like, thanks for being like, your voice is shit. I appreciate that. And thank you for being able to fix it.
Your voice isn't shit. It made sense. I like it. So, all right. So we're going to just get going right now. It's a minute long.
This is Alan Bishop, head alchemist at Spirits of French Lake Distillery. We're glad to introduce to you our newest bottled and bond bourbons. the Lee W. Sinclair 4-grain bourbon, and the Matty Gladden High Rye bourbon. As always, these 2 bourbons are deeply rooted in the history of our location in the Black Forest of southern Indiana. Always double pot distilled, never chill filtered, made using the finest grains, alternative and historic yeast strains that we propagate ourselves, and the methodology that once made southern Indiana an epicenter of American distilling. Matured gracefully in 53-gallon No. 2 Char, new American oak barrels, using a low 105 entry proof. The Lee Sinclair presents an oak-forward profile, which pushes forward the definition and conversation about bourbon possibilities, while the Matty Gladden graces us and demonstrates respect with her 35% rye mash bill. It's not just the spirits in the bottle, it's the spirits of the place. Respect the grain and drink responsibly.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die.
Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Take 2.
And here we go again.
Let's hope that it just doesn't collapse on us again. But I am Tiny, joined by the alchemist, Alan Bishop, and Xavier here.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Brother Alan, for being with us tonight.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was actually, so it took you 2 takes, but that was the most professional intro I've been involved with on a podcast. The minute that song ended, you were on that intro. You were in there. You were animated. You were like fucking Bob Barker with the fucking hand signals and the whole thing, man.
Well, it's kind of like when you, like you said, when you practice it, the second time you usually can figure out, because the whole first time you're doing something, you're trying to figure out what the fuck am I doing wrong. But then you do that second time, you're just like, oh my God, I better get this right.
Right. Well, you're doing better than me on Distillers Talk, because I'm at that point, and I love my show and I love interviewing distillers, right? But I have my moments of like, Christy's all professional. She puts on the professional voice. She does the intro, and she's like, "How are you tonight, Alan?" And I'm like, "Fuck everybody. Fuck all of them. I don't even want to be here right now. I don't need to be a part of this. I'm not in a good mental space. It's Tuesday." Not tonight, obviously, but on Distillers Talk, it's Tuesday or Wednesday. The last thing that I want to do at the end of my day is talk about fucking distilling, Christy. That's how I'm fucking doing.
And that's what that's the real part of you that everybody loves. There's no doubt about it. It's just kind of like if you're not, it's not like you're not going to do it, but it's going to get raw.
Real quick.
Yeah, and it's not like you're going to do a Bourbon Pursuit podcast where you just have to, where you're trying to, like, what would you say?
Maintain
mimic them.
Diplomacy.
You're trying to mimic them.
Yes, maintain diplomacy is the best way to say that. I believe that there's an old time saying that's like, if it's raw, spit on it.
What the fuck?
You're welcome.
That's awesome diplomacy. I'll have to fucking remember that.
Right. So what I got?
That's what you got. Well, tonight we're going to let you take the lead overall. So this podcast, I'm calling it Alan Bishop Takes Over. So we want you to take over as much as you possibly can. We have some questions, obviously, for you, but at the same time, let's just take this we've already in the,
and if we don't, we'll think of some. If
anybody is going to be listening to the, here, they got to check out the YouTube part of it, because the prequel on that is fucking fantastic tonight. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
start off by saying that anything that I say tonight is not my responsibility. It is the responsibility of two gingers from Texas, the Licorice Brothers, and being irresponsible enough to bottle things at 127.5 proof, even if they are delicious. Whatever comes out of my mouth, you can certainly go to Robert Licorice and say, that's your fault. That's your fault. It's your fault that Alan Bishop is the way that he is.
I'll make sure to fucking go tell him that on Facebook tomorrow.
You can message him tonight and tell him that if you want to. It doesn't hurt my feelings. He knows. I love them motherfuckers. They're so good. They're so good at what they do, right? I mean, you can't take that away from them, that's for sure. But I didn't, when you brought this up as a possibility of hey, you lead the show and all that stuff, I was like, I should probably sit down and have some sort of roadmap. And because I am irresponsible and lazy, I did no such thing. So I feel like this is my opportunity, obviously, to get to question you guys a little bit and to talk about just whatever comes to mind. So the first things first that I wanted to kind of bring up, something cool coming up that people can look forward to, or maybe you look forward to it like a car crash, maybe not so much a celebration, but the two of you were a part of something that's really close to my heart, which is a documentary that Bo Cumberland, a fantastic filmmaker, particularly in the realm of moonshine distillers, and also some bourbon films as well. Something that Bo and I have worked on for the past year. You guys came to the second filming session where I went out of my way to destroy Bo Cumberland's dreams. So Bo Cumberland's dreams were to have a film about my distilling history, my background, and what I'm doing now, and sort of present that as documentary evidence of my existence for the future. And my brain automatically, when I hear those sort of things, goes to, how can I fuck this up, right? And so the best way to fuck it up is to get a bunch of good people together, hang out, drink, distill a little bit, maybe illicitly, and just have a good time. And Bo Cumberland, I'll be damned if he didn't pull at least a 1+ hour documentary of really good stuff out of what should have been 2 shit shows worth of non-information, right? Almost, you take the worst reality show in the world and amplify it by 10, maybe even Jackass level. That's really what we presented to Bo Cumberland. And Bo Cumberland was able to find the spirit of what we were getting at and to capture that. And it's going to be released as a full-length documentary. I don't know what platforms yet, but it is coming. And you two are both a part of that. And, the day that we brought you guys in, you guys became part of this family, this tribe of sarcastic assholes that I've been cultivating for the past 6 or 7 years.
That's Mr. Sarcastic Asshole to you. And don't forget
100,000,000%. And we are proud to call you Mr. Sarcastic Asshole because we do not discriminate. We're much like Eagle Fang Karate in the whole Karate Kid universe, that we accept everyone as long as they kick ass.
There you go.
Well, I'm thinking back. It's kind of like I did the interview, which I hope there's some of that on there. But I know the moment that he was filming me, it had to be about, we had been there since 10 o'clock in the afternoon. We were
10 in the morning, yes.
10 in the morning, 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Because that's a fucking thing. By the way, I will keep telling that story. What am I drinking right now? What am I pouring? You see what's out there. What do you want us to pour in our Spirit of French Lick Glencairns?
Oh man, I'm a little torn here. So we ain't making no more weeder, so that's a good one to start with. But let me say this first. Solomon Scott has not yet been released as a mainstream product. That is the big one for this year. We went the opposite of every other company out there. Everybody else was releasing young rye. We released young wheated bourbon and went the opposite on rye and went to 5 years. So right now, Solomon Scott do you have that out there? What do you got there? Is that Lost River?
It's right there, Solomon Scott.
Yep, there you go.
That was that barrel pick from Coombs.
Beautiful. Yes. So that's where I would start because that's where my heart is right now is Solomon Scotch.
I picked the wrong one. This is it. Nope, I'm going the wrong.
Nope.
There
you go.
Fucking look! Don't look at the screen, you dick. I'm like going in the wrong direction.
It's like your other left.
Yeah. So let's get that baby. Here you go, Mister. Yeah, of course.
So that right there and the bottled and bond apple brandy, those are my two big deals for this year that I'm proud of. I'm behind. I can't wait to get them out there. The apple was supposed to be back in September, and we couldn't get bottles and we couldn't get label approval, believe it or not. All things government being efficient as they are, kind of fucked us on September, October, November, and December, the big months for apple brandy and rye whiskey. So this year there will be a 5-year-old bottled and bond Solomon Scott rye whiskey. This is an old school rye whiskey. This is basically the same mash bill they use at Mount Vernon. We switched out the traditional distiller's malt for a little bit of Victory malt, which is a little more biscuity, a little more dry. This is a 60% rye, which differentiates itself from obviously MGP at 95 and or Kentucky barely legal. So this one is
like this.
What?
Who
style
like this?
Yeah, of course. Mrs. Xavier.
Mrs. Xavier's a rye whiskey girl.
I think it's that she doesn't have a lot of taste in her, like her taste buds aren't the most refined, but rye just wakes it the fuck up for her.
Right. Well, and this being a 60% rye, you're still getting, 30+% corn. So you're still getting that corn sweetness, but the rye is the main player. And it's a very old school style. As I mentioned, it's somewhere in between. If you think of it historically, it falls somewhere in between what Monongahela rye in Pennsylvania would have been and what Maryland rye was. And from Virginia all the way down the Ohio Valley, that 65% rye up until about 1815, 1816 was the end style of whiskey. And it's basically disappeared short of Mount Vernon. They're the only other place I know of making that recipe in particular. Ours is a little differentiated by the malt, etc., and the yeast. But I think it presents something in rye whiskey that people who don't think they like rye whiskey, a lot of bourbon drinkers, I don't know if you guys, seen this or not, but a lot of bourbon drinkers seem to shy away from rye. And that's because they think that rye is that MGP 95, right? They think it's that cherry cough syrup, that dill, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
This doesn't have that. This is like apricot. And if there's cherry there, and there is cherry there, it's like maraschino cherry. It's very cocktail oriented. It's very round. It's very fatty. It's very sweet.
This would make a great whiskey highball.
I'm getting a little bit of dark chocolate too on it. It's like really rich. It's there, and then I get that when you said the apricot, and then also the cherry. There's a little bit of that, but then I'm getting that. I'm not getting a wood or leather or tobacco. It's
not at all.
It's definitely dark.
I'm definitely
no sugar,
cherry.
Dark chocolate.
And you're likely not getting any dill, and you're likely not getting any anise flavor.
No,
there's nothing green.
I don't want to spit it out. I just the ryes I don't like have that dill, but it also has. The only way I can describe it is it's celery. It's that green, earthy celery.
That vegetative.
I just don't. I mean, people like that. I mean, I understand people like it, but for me, it's like I just want to give it the fucking finger because I just don't want anything to do with it. It's so horrible in my mouth.
I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off. To me, celery tastes like you're eating a solid form of pond water. So if this had anything similar to celery in it, I'd be spitting it out. This
right after Jolie took a piss in it.
I don't know about that, but I can tell you it's bad news, but this is good.
That's how I am with MGP rye. I love MGP because, and I've said this on your show before, they kept the lights on for all of us Hoosier distillers when nobody else could get anything going, right?
Right.
But that MGP style of rye, which was designed for blended whiskeys, and some people are using it right nowadays, like Penelope, right?
Bullet uses it exclusively, don't they?
And it has, to me, growing up in a trailer park, being white trash, etc. It's off-brand fucking Robitussin. And I will never be able to get past that ever.
Yeah, you can't get once it's like when you get that taste, it's just kind of like it's not it. You gotta, for people to produce a good rye, for me, it's like you can always tell there are people who are working at it. But that just standard rye that they're rushing and it's too green, it's like, but even fucking Willet, I don't like Willet, but the worst I ever had was Heaven's Door, which then I found out they were MG, and it might not have been 95.5. Now, the fucking most insane thing though is we go down to Dayton Barrel Works, me and Xavier with Bill Hockett, and his rye is 90.5 rye, and it don't taste like 95 rye. How the fuck does he do that?
It's because he's got a good palate and he's going through barrels.
He goes through like a shit ton of barrels that he buys, and then he buys them, and
he finds what he likes,
mixes them, and puts what he, because it was I have to admit.
And the other great rye we had was the Luca Mariano rye.
Well,
that
was for you.
Well,
Mariano was
I thought it was outstanding.
Yeah.
Have you guys, and I know there's tons of hype around it, and you guys know I'm not a hype guy, and I hate the industry, and I hate all this secondary market shit and all that stuff. But have you guys had the 3-chamber Leopold?
No, and you talk about it. No.
Guys, I will tell you up front, and I will tell everyone who listens to this show right now. I have said many times across multiple platforms that I've never found a bourbon or a rye I would pay more than $100 for. And the reason for that is bourbon and rye were always meant to be blue collar drinks, right? They should be working people drinks. Leopold Brothers 3-chamber as a distiller is the one American whiskey that I would pay whatever the fuck Leopold wants for it. Not only because it's good and not only because it's differentiated, but because it shows his passion and his drive. And guys, literally to take the amount of money it took to get Vendome to build that 3-chamber, and them not even really understanding the engineering, and for him to study that and put the time and effort into it, that alone is worth more than $100 to me. But that aside, it is just goddamn good whiskey. And it's one of those whiskeys that you go back to and you're like, every time I taste this, there's something different. There's something unique, but there's also something sort of familiar about it, right? It takes you back to a place, maybe genetic memories involved from our ancestors all being drinkers, right? Where you're like, there's something here that's new, but it's kind of tugging at your heartstrings. It reminds you of things from when you were younger.
Yeah, or it reminds you of being, it makes you, you're part of something bigger than you, you know?
Yeah.
So what you're saying, what I should do is go back and have some Southern Comfort to remember that time when I was, and I haven't had it since, but I should just fucking remember that one more time, like revisit it, because I won't even.
No, we're not saying that at all.
As a Hoosier, I will say it, and here's why. Millions of dollars pouring into the riverfront from a company that I'm not fond of their products, but the more Hoosiers you can hire into the distilling industry, the happier I will be.
All right.
And so, my soul is for sale in tiny increments, but only to the highest bidder, and also the bidder that provides the most Hoosier credibility along with the most Hoosier jobs. So I have to back that company a little bit.
Supporting your industry right there. All right. You know what? The next fucking podcast, I'm going to have some Southern Comfort on, and I'm going to remember what that taste brings back from my childhood.
You get one of them Sazerac boys on the show and bring me on, and me and him will have a real conversation. It'll be fun.
All right. So getting back to where we were 5 minutes ago with
Rye whiskey,
but no, not with the rye whiskey, but with what Bo was doing. There was that moment at 3:00 after 10 a.m. drinking, and everybody brought. Was the Leopold there? Did someone bring that day?
I believe it was on the table. That, if you remember, that was a 6-foot folding plastic table, and there wasn't a bare spot on that table.
Nope.
It kind of had
I mean,
a little bit of
And then
sway back to it.
And then Kevin brings fucking Bookers. He's like, I brought 3 Bookers. I love Bookers. And we were talking Bookers. Now we can talk Bookers. And I'm just like, and he's like, try this one. So around 3:00 between the distillate that we were sampling and all the different bourbons, I had my moment, which told me to basically reel it the fuck back in. Otherwise, I'm going to get myself in trouble. But it was completely recorded by Bo as I took like 5 minutes to circle around, falling down on the ground, trying to get back up, not really being able to, then being helped up. And then the rest of the day I was totally cool because I backed it off. But I know he recorded that, and somehow I feel that is going to be a moment in this documentary.
So it will be. Your interview was, by the way, 1,000,000% fucking perfect on point. And so one of the things that I'd forgotten about, because we're all drinking when we're doing these things, we're all, in the heat of the moment, we're trying to keep up with stuff. There's a still running, trying to do a mash, trying to talk to everybody, all that stuff. About, I think it was 2:45 in the afternoon. You'll see me on the video. I make a pronouncement to you guys. You guys were all getting a little drunk at the time, getting a little loud and a little rowdy. And I said, it's 2:45 in the afternoon in the woods in Southern Indiana. You're fucking drunk. Where else would you rather be? Those next 15 minutes are fun and integral. And I don't know how much of this will be documented for sure in the video, but the part you might be forgetting, Jeff, and I want to point this out because it's fucking great. And I've not seen the footage, but I know Bo has it because he filmed every bit of it. Is that we all got together at one point, and I had a jar of moonshine, and I very rarely talk about, my family's moonshining background, but I had a jar of moonshine that was based on my grandfather's recipe. It was one of the last jars that I made when I was a kid. Literally made this jar when I was like 16 years old. We're passing it around in a circle. We're all drinking from it, right? Lots of weird things happen in that moment, and then not all of those will be on film, thankfully, for all of us, right?
Right.
But what definitely has to be on film and be at least in the B-roll, the credits, is what I like to refer to as the killing of Jeffrey Muller.
It's fucking was.
Which was the jar went in 2 circles and it came back around to me and everybody was like, oh, drink it, Alan, just fucking shoot it. And I was already plastered and I was like, I got to get through this day. And I was like, Jeff Muller, there's about 1/4 of this jar left. Can you clear it? And brother, you went at that thing. Oh. You went at that thing like I never saw anybody go to drink.
I did.
And after you were done with it, you literally proceeded to the slowest fall I have ever seen in my life.
I forgot all about that.
I was even when I was falling, it was like fucking. I'm like going, is Bo doing something to me? I'm falling in slow motion, and then I kept expecting the ground to come up and come up and come up, and it wouldn't do it. And then all of a sudden, I was on the ground, and then I was trying to get back up, and it wasn't working. Some people helped me, and then I was all right the rest of the time. I wasn't. Yeah, you were fine. I kind of sat in the chair, got my bearings. It didn't go too far.
In less than. Well, heck, less than 45 minutes, you were like nothing happened.
Right, but I remember
absolutely.
that moment.
Yeah, you were fine.
And
and what's funny, and I don't know that the footage will reflect this because I'm not seeing that footage, and this is just from memory, right? And I was super drunk too. I remember being very super drunk in front of you hitting the jar, doing the slowest fall of all time, and me being too drunk. I was trying to reach out to grab you as you fell, but it was too slow. It was just.
Yeah, you're making emotions like the old $6 million man.
I mean, normally big guys fall the hardest and the fastest, right? I remember that spin. I guess it's something when you work at a recycling plant, you always figure out if you can start to spin and move around that the ground doesn't come up as fast, and then you're just it's kind of like a soft landing instead of just straight down.
What was great is after that, you were completely fine. Other than the only thing that I heard you say, like the rest of the day, as far as like any sort of like drunken commentary, was for about the next 30 minutes. And I've been here, but I've been in worse positions. I've been laying in mud puddles because I tried to jump over a fire drunk, right? You were sitting in a chair and you said, You said this twice that I remember. You go, somebody just fucking shoot me. And I don't know if Bo got that, but that was a moment, right?
Yeah,
that's
I felt embarrassed that no one else was falling. It's just fucking.
That's the beauty of doing these things is there are moments in time, right? And we only capture so much of it, right? And it's not a bad thing. And I've been in worse places, and that's the beauty of having a tribe of people, which is what this documentary is going to be all about, right? What is beyond the whiskey industry? Like when you make friends in this industry, what do they become? Can you be vulnerable with one another? Can you have those moments? We've all had those moments, and certainly Bo has plenty of moments of me way more drunk than I should be on film, right? But it was with the right people at the right times. Maybe there's some entertainment value to that. And I don't know that anybody outside of our group will find this film funny. I suspect that they will, because I suspect that a lot of people are going to watch this film. They're going to look at it and go, man, I wish that I had friends like that I could hang out with a couple times a fucking year, right? And have a moment that I will never forget based upon purely friendship and the connection that we made in this industry, which normally those connections in this industry are very tangential. They don't mean a whole lot a lot of times. But when people really get along in this industry, it becomes family, right? And that's why you guys got to come to my family farm, be a part of this thing. You know, we got to share a lot of cool moments together that day, and that's going to be recorded on film for all the time. We can look back on it when we're 60, 70 years old and go, God damn, that was a fun day.
When I'm 60,
you know?
When he's 60. He's
right. Well, you look younger than I do.
Wait, he's 80, 90.
I can look back on this tomorrow when I'm 61.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get where you're coming from. No,
right.
But the whole industry as a whole, okay, even the families of the bigger distilleries still understand what you understand. The families. I'm not talking about the corporate ownership, because right. I find that those families or those consultants that have large, one thing you need is to do your craft. Somebody has to have some fucking money because it's expensive. And then to get through what you've gotten through at the Spirit of French, like now you've been there for 6, your shit's now to the point where you no longer have to buy someone else's stuff. You're putting out what you laid down in there. And now that's a going forward process that if you keep laying it down, you never have to worry about it. Now, when other things happen and you go through that process, that is a very stressful process for any distillery, because you have to put out a good product, but you deep down know exactly what that product isn't going to be the same as what you're putting down, and you're going to put down something better. And there's no doubt about it. Okay. But that transition, and there's going to be some people who love what you put down. And even though it's better, they're going to be like, fuck you. You changed it on me. You know what I mean? Because there's certain amount of people, a majority of the amount of the people like consistency. But at the same time, when you're doing it at a craft distillery, you get less of those people because they're looking for that
new experience.
If you want consistency, you can buy it from Beam.
I will tell you that you worded that in such a way that was an excellent question, and inferences being what they are, right? The truth of the matter is that as a craft distiller, I don't worry too much about the future because I come from a home distilling background. And so I'm always researching home distilling constantly, right? I'm on fucking home distilling forums. I'm reading what the guys in home distilling are doing. And let me tell you guys, what you've seen so far from craft distillers is not shit compared to what you will see 10 years from now from craft distillers that came from the home distilling background. The only fear that I have in my life that's not really even a fear is that 5-10 years from now I have to compete with myself. Well, I know what I've already done. I know what works. I know what doesn't work, and I can move beyond that, right? And maybe it doesn't attract the same people, but it certainly attracts people one way or the other, especially if you can be real about what you're doing, how you're doing it, the why of how you're doing it, etc. Right? I will also say that I talk I'm a lot like Chicken Little, right? I talk a lot of shit, but I would never talk shit about like Freddie No, for example, right? He's doing some very cool shit. You guys have got to hang out with the family. You got to be there where things happened in that family. Freddie is a great fucking distiller. He understands the background and the history of his family. And even though they don't any longer, obviously, as a family, own the distillery, they own the legacy, and he doesn't want to fuck that up. And that's fucking cool. I will take that over top of any distillery that comes along with big corporate backing nowadays that, you know, it's just about, you know, whatever their legacy is. If there's no family members involved, why do they give a shit, right? One way or the other. But you have a major distillery that still has people from the original family involved in it. They're there to protect that legacy, and they're there to create new traditions for the future. So I hope that kind of covered both those bases for you, one way or the other. But for craft distillers, here's the truth: I'm competing with myself, and I'm competing with a bunch of home distillers, many of whom, truthfully, and this, in my opinion, this is the future of the distilled spirits industry in the United States. Many of these craft distillers who will become legal are going to push the envelope in ways that you've never thought about. There are things that I read every day on these home distilling forums that blow my mind as a distiller and as a historian. And I'm looking at these things going, fucking, that's genius. And you know what? It's guys that love what they do, and they're playing around in their garage on Sunday, right? They're literally running a still while watching Ozark, you know, and they're just that damn good. They have good ideas. And you know why they have good ideas? Because there was no tradition burdening them in any way to say, you can't do this, right? And if you have that mindset of nobody can tell me what I can't do, and then you can find somebody to back that up with money, the world is your playground. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, like you said, when you were talking about Freddie and Fred, they're always they have to fight for what they're doing to keep it the best they possibly can. And then they throw down that new distillery, which gives Freddie ability to create some of what he wanted to do that he never could, that was almost impossible to create when you're trying to distill 6 billion gallons of fucking Jim Beam. That's set up for that. So, you know, they build that other distillery, and now he's got a playground to play in, and he is so involved with all the other distillers. It's kind of like he's young, but he's not, there's no closed-mindedness on him. He's open, and he wants to learn from everybody.
And I will also say this too, and I think that Freddie would say the same thing. I take it as a win for craft distilling that Freddie went to bat to have a craft distillery at Jim Beam, 100%. And that Jim Beam was willing to invest that money into a quote unquote craft distillery, right? That means that they are now paying attention to what we're doing. And I don't think anybody said that up to this point. I don't even think Freddie has said that up to this point. But the fact that Jim Beam is paying enough attention at this point to what craft distillers are doing, that they are willing to put several $1 million into a craft distillery on campus, is a win for craft distilling. That means that at the very least, we're on the radar. We're on the radar with the big guys, right?
Yeah.
And they realize that things are changing. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And truthfully, when it comes down to it, I love the idea of having a great big company with a bunch of money behind craft distilling. And I love the idea of having somebody that's passionate about craft distilling, as he is, to be the voice of reason behind that. Why would we want to do these things? Why do we want to research these things? Easily, and you guys know this, Jim Beam could focus on 1 or 2 labels and still make more money, in bulk off those 1 or 2 labels and all the craft distilleries in the world put together. But they're choosing to go down that path because they see how things are changing, right? It's almost, it's a new world, and it's also a throwback.
Yeah.
So,
well, I just know some of the stuff they're producing. Even if you look at what's happening now, the thing that sucks about Buffalo Trace craft distilling is that when they produce it, it costs you a fucking billion fucking dollars, like OFC, Old Fire Copper. It's like that retails at $2,000. And granted, and like you said, is there a bourbon on the planet that, that's distilled that's worth $2,000? And yes, they give you the packaging, the marketing, that and what you're buying is, you're not just paying for the bourbon, you're paying for the presentation and the whole thing and the rarity. But what they're doing with they're bringing back Old Taylor. They're doing then they actually dug up those fermenting tanks, and they're actually, you got Harlan there fermenting in one of those tanks, and he's basically producing a small amount of it. And when it hits the market, whether someone like me will be able to taste it is a whole different story, but it's kind of cool as fuck. And it's craft distillery, but they're so big that it costs so much. But like the regular craft distillers like yourself are doing similar things and producing just as good a whiskey, but at a pretty reasonable price compared to $2,000, right?
For a fraction of their production budget and $0 worth of marketing. Myself and Joe Lee Kasperzak and Sean White built Spirits of French Lick out of literally nothing, right? And I should also be honest here, even though I give Beam credit for what they're doing, I don't think all those companies are equal, in my opinion. So a company with Fireball and a lot of cheap vodka is not the same, in my opinion, as a company with an asset like Freddie No. Obviously, because what do they really care? You even take these are things that keep me unpopular and keep me out of the mainstream bourbon, by the way. Take Brown-Forman, right? What do they give a shit about anything? They could lose everything they own short of Jack Daniels, and guess what? They're going to be just fine, right? It's not going to hurt them one way or the other. And I agree with you. It is cool to see that they have that Sazerac has supported the excavation of that old distillery, and it's there for us all to go see, and they're going to do product in it. And, they did, they luckily, thankfully for all of us true distilling history fans, they gave Nicholas Lacruente, open access to the site to interpret it in the right way. That is cool. And that comes along with money, but that is for them, that is what, 2% of their marketing budget a year, if it's that.
Oh yeah, right. But you got to look at like Harlan. You got to like give him the credit because he's fighting for that kind of shit. To like, obviously, he's giving them the direction, because the people who are supporting it, they don't fucking understand the fucking direction. But he's saying, if we fucking do this, but then they're going, well, then we can charge this, and it's just all like right. You wish that he'd fight for. That it wouldn't be, but they do fight for their regular product to be reasonably priced. And it really is, if you could get it while you stand in line for 14 hours.
And so then I have to presume this is one reason that you guys continuously put up with my shit and having me on the show and being a sponsor and all that stuff, right? Money aside. Controversial moment number one. Here we go. This will be fun. And I'm sure that there are bourbon geeks that'll lose their shit over this. Okay. But I'm going to say it because it's a lived experience, right? It's something I went through. Yes. So, Harlan. All right. Nothing against Harlan Wheatley. I don't know the gentleman. I have met him one time. And the one time I met him, the literal experience that I had with him was an interruption in a conversation between two other distillers from another major distillery that is still family owned, and you can fill in the blanks, where he literally brought his cell phone over during the bourbon festival and said, look what I can do with my cell phone, as far as I can monitor everything at the distillery on my cell phone. I never want to ever have a moment where I can look at my cell phone and go, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to be there. I have to think about it, right? It's right here on my cell phone. If something goes wrong, I can fix it on my cell phone. That to me is not craft. And that's nothing against him, right? That makes his life easier.
Well, and
that's the problem that I have with the industry overall, is the art the spirituality, the realness of it, those moments of being in the distillery and going, fucking something doesn't sound right. Something doesn't smell right. This guy that's on my team that I work with every day, he's not acting right. Maybe there's something going on in his personal life. Those are the things that are lost in the industrialization of beverage alcohol, right?
You're right.
And that's nothing against Harlan whatsoever. That's just a moment that I had. And that's one of those very early moments that I had when I came into the industry. One of the things I've said consistently throughout my years in the industry is I had a lot of culture shock when I came in of, fuck, this is how this works. It's so much more crooked and so much more tangential and fucked up than anything that ever happened with my family in all the years that we were involved in illicit distillation. Right?
Right.
Controversial moment there. So,
well, and overall, the way that I look at the industry now that I've been into I've seen all aspects of it. I've seen it from the pot still at barrel room distillery where he mashes through a screen with a shovel, you know, and he's not even coming close to getting the amount of, you know.
Do you know where that idea came from? That came from Distillers Talk. You can go back and actually listen to that episode with that distiller.
Well, that was insane. I mean, it was splattering everywhere, but it was so down to earth. And then he talked about when he sells his stillage to the farmer, the cows come running because they want to get drunk off their ass because he's left so much alcohol out on the plate, you know, because of how he's doing things. But it's old fashioned. But then I've been at Bardstown Bourbon Company where they have complete control over the cooking, and they can and what they're doing with the fermenting, and they can control the yield by adjusting the temperature here. You know, there's a lot of control that you have. Now, what I've found, especially in like the artistic field, you know, like just art in general, there used to be the painters, and then there were people, then there was the impressionists, and they didn't paint real. That once they were painting with you know, dots and splashes, you know what I mean? But as it evolves, what'll happen is this computerization at first, it allows people who aren't skilled to produce a product that's okay. But then when you get somebody who's fucking an artist and you give them those tools, eventually that allows them to control everything for their art, so they can make it they have more control over the art, but they understand the art. And then eventually you get people who fucking master that and then still use it as artistry, not technology. Same thing with computer art. You know, there's the computer art aspect of it, but now it's, you know, Warhol, you gave him a computer in 1984 and that fucker still could produce art on the computer, where everybody else was like, look what we can do. We can change this. And then it just became bastardized. But now you've got the computer artists that have had that tool for a long time creating fantastic art again.
I think, you know, if the Village Idiot can have a word for a second, I think just as kind of an outsider, that I've never distilled anything. I've certainly done my best to drink as much of it as possible, but I think there's a happy medium between the technology and the old-fashioned hands-on dedication. And I think where if you're, like, say you're doing one of your runs, and let's say that run is going to take 24 hours or even 18 hours or whatever, or longer, or whatever long period of time, sure, you want to be there when it starts and you want to be there when it ends. But if you walk away from it, you might want to be able to get an alert on your phone that something's going wrong at that moment you're not there, as compared to coming back and finding out that there was a big oh shit moment and nobody caught it. I think there's a way to harness the technology and preserve the art, and leverage the technology to enhance the art.
Yeah. But
I think you're not wrong. And so here's what I would say to both of you. You're both right in general. In my opinion, this is just opinion stuff, right? This is all subjective, so it doesn't really matter to the average listener what dumbass Alan Bishop Hillbilly's opinion is in Pekin, Indiana, or anybody's opinion, right?
Or my fucking opinion. Like, who the fuck am I?
Opinions are like
But
assholes.
a
Nobody
great
has
example. A great example would be let's compare it to music, right? So one of the greatest lyrics written of all time is from Rush's Limelight. You know, all this machinery making modern music can still be open-hearted, right? It's really just a question of your honesty, right? And that's true. That's absolutely true.
It sure does.
But let me ask you, and this is again subjective, and no reply needed. It's subjective, right? It's whatever your opinion is. Would you rather listen to music created by a computer because it's a little more accessible? You don't necessarily have to have the artistic integrity to be a part of that, right? Maybe you have some composing ability, right? Or would you rather listen to an early Bob Dylan or Neil Young record where you can hear the guitar strings slide as he's struggling to get from whatever note he was at to whatever note he wants to get to, and maybe his voice cracks a little bit, right? There's a human element. There's a human element to everything that we do in technology that technology can't recreate. And that doesn't mean that the big companies don't have something worthwhile. I mean, I've said this many times over and over again. The one Sazerac product that I will buy every time I have an opportunity to get it for a fair price, which you don't get in Indiana, is Sazerac Rye, right? Because it's fucking good. I know what I'm getting every time. It's not great, but it's good. It's good, right? And I've had many moments drinking that whiskey, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes down to it, as a distiller, as an artisan, I would rather taste a reflection of that person's day, that person's mindset, that team's day, that team's mindset. The mistakes they made sometimes are beautiful in and of their own accord. They take you to a place that maybe you don't expect to go. Now, that can go two ways. Craft whiskey can be really good or it can be really bad, right? And very rarely is it just kind of meh. But it's enthralling. And that's something that I think that we miss out on in a lot of our consumerism nowadays. I will tell you that I think that, and I mentioned the show Ozark earlier, just to come back around. I think that the reason that shows like Ozark work is because they reflect things that are possibilities in real life. Life gets fucked up. Shit goes wrong, right? Every day is not your day, right? Sometimes it's fucking ugly. Yeah. But sometimes it's transcendent. To me, that is the beauty of distillation. And I'm not knocking those big guys. I'm not knocking commodity whiskey because we wouldn't be where we are without them. But the thing that doesn't get mentioned very often is they wouldn't be where we are without farm distillers. Nope. Farm distilling and the tie to agriculture created this entire path for all of us, right? Right. No commodity whiskey is not related directly to the farm distillers of the 1800s.
But even today, that marriage between the farms and the distillers is still fucking there. It's like the corn has to be distilled because if let's just say they made fucking alcohol distilling again illegal, correct? Just imagine what would happen to the fucking farmers. No, you would be, because you go into it. But I'm just saying, I still can't believe to this day that they have not properly fucking given whiskey its fucking due, because this country was in the 1919 or 1920 when they fucking started. This country was in a fucking industrial, everything was going good. And from the time they put Prohibition in, the government no longer was getting that tax money, and they were fucking whatever. And then the farmers stopped farming as much corn, which led to the fucking Dust Bowl, because they fucking couldn't sell their corn because they weren't distilling it. The whole country went to shit. And at one point, it wasn't fucking the president who said, hey, let's put a chicken in every pot. It was fucking, they lifted fucking Prohibition, and the fucking amount of money they could make again allowed our government to fucking function again. I mean, it's like insane that that's not in the history books.
Yeah. Well, the creature from Jackal Island came from that, right? The personal income tax came from the prohibition of liquor. A lot of people don't realize that, right? You think about this for a second. This is one of those things that I've tried to bring to the forefront for the past several years. You have an economy like Southern Indiana that was based on apple brandy from apple farming, and these apples were not made for consumption out of hand. They were literally bred for apple brandy. And what happens when prohibition hits? These farmers all go,
what the fuck do we do?
Me. What the fuck am I going to do? I got to go cut these trees down that my great grandfather planted because they're not worth a fuck anymore for anything. I got to plant commodity crops, right, to be able to make up whatever difference that I can possibly make up. And it destroys an entire way of life, an entire culture.
And then nobody has any fucking money to buy my crop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
No, yes. That's just like, it's like you said, personal income tax fucking goes in 1916. And then the most fucked up thing is that they catch Al Capone after Prohibition and put him in jail, not because of what he did. On taxes, but it wasn't it wasn't income tax evasion on liquor. It wasn't on drugs. It was he fucking bought dairies, milk dairies, and they fucking got him on him not paying his taxes on his goddamn dairy farms.
So I'll throw another. Insane. This is super deep stuff here, guys, and I'll tell you, I don't know how many listeners will follow, but I'm going to throw this out there as a previous home distiller. So the dairy thing that they got him on not only was money laundering, but a lot of people don't understand this. The amount of dairy equipment, right, that is available at dairies that you are now buying for money laundering that is equitable to the ability to produce illicit alcohol is outstanding. And a good example of this is the very first big still I ever had was a 150-gallon milk tank, a stirrator tank, right?
Yeah.
So not only are you money laundering, but you're taking advantage of the equipment that's available at dairies that's sanitary, that is of a certain quality, right? And people miss those things because they don't know those things. They've not lived that life, right? I've said this many times. So one of the things that really bothers me about living in a very quiet now suburb of Louisville, Kentucky, is this phrase, the bourbon life, because no one can explain to me what the fuck that means. What does that mean? I live the bourbon life.
They say,
what's it mean? It means that you live in the backyard of bourbon. You go on bourbon tours. You drink bourbon on, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, what the fuck ever. Guys, I have lived the moonshine life. Every dollar I have made for the past 20 years has in some way, shape, or form been tied to the production of illicit or legal alcohol in one way, shape, or form. So when I see these guys move in here, these people from the city trying to find a quiet life, and they always want to change things, right? They don't want things to be the way they were. They want things to be the way they want them to be, the things they've tried to escape. And they say, I'm living the bourbon life. I'm like, you don't even fucking know. You don't have any clue. You don't have any idea. I live this every day. My every waking, breathing moment, short of moments with my daughter and my wife, are literally about distilling. And that's the way that these old farm distillers before industrialization and before prohibition, that's the way they lived their life. They had the same problems that I do every day, laying in bed trying to go to sleep going, what am I going to do tomorrow? Where am I going to go with this? How can I take this to the next level, the next step? How can I get attention? How can I sell more product? How can I make things better than what they are? Right. And I think that's the real difference between, let's say, craft distilling and big distilling is, I'm not sure how many nights that Harlan Wheatley has to lay in bed and go, if I make the wrong decision tomorrow, my paycheck is fucked 4 years from now.
Well, I don't think
what I mean.
But when I had him on the show, what he was worried about, what you could tell, is that he didn't want to fuck up a good
legacy.
The legacy. Yeah. He understands his importance, and they are doubling production. And we talked about, well, if you've got warehouse, H and warehouse C, one's producing Colonel Taylor, one's producing Blanton's. Okay, you put in another still. How do you double production? Because you've spent millions of dollars marketing that it comes from right here. And he's like, well, I can guarantee you that we've looked into the research and we understand the logistics of where those are. We're putting them on the same angle, the same place, but we're building 7 metal still houses. But that still doesn't guarantee that it's all going to taste like Blanton's, but it does guarantee it's all going to be Blanton's. And
it doesn't guarantee consistency, but let me also say this, and I think you'll appreciate this, maybe an angle you've not thought of. So maybe those things do keep him awake at night, right? But what's the difference between him and a craft distiller? A, there's a lot of money in his company and they keep selling Fireball, everything keeps going. And B, there's a whole bunch of people coming up to him every day going, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've studied it. We've looked at it. We've got the science. Here's the graph.
But deep down,
okay.
if he like, and he's been there for fucking ever and he's still young. That's one thing that's a fucking amazing. And, but he's been
got a very fucking weird beard going on.
But at the same time, I think even though everybody's coming up to him and telling him it's going to be all right, I think he understands that he has to work his ass off to make everything right. And if he doesn't, it's like when you have 400 employees, and Greg Schneider explained this when he was at Brown and Foreman, when they used to, distill, and they'd get a whole fucking run fucked up because the guy on third shift didn't fucking turn the pressure right while they were making the still. And they all knew what to do, but he was 5 minutes late in turning the fucking valve. It fucked up the whole run.
Well, and I can see that side of it too, because, and this is the other thing, the beautiful thing about doing something like Distiller's Talk with Christy Atkinson is talking to Pat Heist, right? So when it comes to yeast in the United States, Pat Heist and I are probably, and Pat more than I am by far, are probably the only two, in my opinion, that really have some idea of what the fuck's going on because of practical experimentation, right?
Yep.
And one place where Pat and I disagree is the matter of complete sterility, right? Pat's all about pure cultures. I'm all about here's the way it was done back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
The difference between the two of us is the following. This is a real thing that people don't think about. Pat is all about purity. And the reason he's all about purity is because they have to make a lot of product every day. If Pat fucks up and he uses the wrong yeast variety, even if the flavor is better, he's losing 50 fucking barrels, right? If I fuck up, I'm losing 5 gallons.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you fuck up, it might make it fucking better. Where even if he fucks up and makes it better, he still has to deal with consistency. Yeah. That's what Firm Solution says. We'll fucking come in, make sure you're consistent. And that's why sterility is so important, because when you're going into another place saying, hey, this yeast strain, this will consistently make your product before it's aged taste consistently the same, but where you're pulling fucking for not every single, but a lot of different brands of what you're doing, you're pulling them from different areas because you want them to be uniquely different.
Yes, and I agree 100%. And that's where I can see the utility of the industrial sort of mindset, right? And that's where that's the meeting ground that I can have, right? There's some understanding there, and that's one of the things that Pat and I came to on the show we did was that's the difference, right? And economically, I understand that, and from a quality perspective, he understands that, and that's why he's going to make certain suggestions. For example, if he's consulting with somebody, and I'm going to make certain suggestions, and those suggestions are going to change based on what their end goal is, right? And that's the real difference between craft distilling and commodity distilling. They're both, you're all trying to make good alcohol. Nobody wants to harm the industry.
He consults on shit alcohol. I mean, I don't know what you do, but he fucking consults on yeast for fucking White Claw. And that's about the biggest piss fucking shit I've ever tasted. Talk about why would you drink that? There's only one reason to drink White Claw, and that's to get fucked up. There's no enjoyment out of drinking it.
You're not wrong. Wrong.
It's just like you drink bourbon and you understand, you get all these flavors and everything. You drink White Claw, and it's just like, what the fuck? I couldn't even finish it. I couldn't. I just was. It wasn't a drain pour. It was just like, I can't finish this because I don't want this in my mouth.
I think you guys will appreciate this. I'm going to suggest that you try the Weeder, and I will give you an example of a craft distiller's fuck up.
Okay, so let's do it. And then we got to finish up with we're going to do the absinthe, but we'll do the Weeder. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Here is the Weeder. And you're going to give us an example of the fuck up. Because I can tell you, we just had the William Dalton, my bourbon of the year, with the French staves, the Alchemist all over it. I really love the bottle and the labeling.
Good.
And just the caramel. I mean, it's like eating a milk dud, not made by Milk Duds, but made by the best caramel and milk chocolate maker in the world. That's what that tastes like to me.
So this in particular, and I'm going to throw this out there, Whiskey Advocate, when we first started up, this actually got us an 86 at Whiskey Advocate, which for a very young craft distiller at 2 years old was fantastic. This is one of those weird things where state laws play into what you can do and what you can't do. And so what had happened was there were a number of, and I'll just mention the company now because we're a few years out, we no longer have this in production. I had an opportunity to buy a bunch of Wyoming whiskey barrels. And what had happened was when Steve Nally went to Wyoming, he basically had tuned his column still to produce what they had produced in Kentucky, not taking into account the environment in which the barrels were aging. And so the barrels were a little bit off. There was a lot of banana ester, which is sort of a sign that there's more heads there than what you want. And if you were in a traditional Kentucky and or Southern Indiana environment, it'd be fairly easy to blow those heads off through maturation in the warehouses if the warehouses got warm enough. So when I tasted this whiskey, there was nothing wrong with it. It just needed a little time under heat. So we bought $100,000, which to most big companies would be nothing, right?
Right.
But to a startup, it's a lot of money.
You must have done a lot of dancing to get that money right into that. But they knew you needed it.
Yes. And so at the time that we bought it, we were still under the impression that we'd be able in Indiana to buy whiskey, rebottle it, and then sell it, just like multiple states do. So we were going to brand this as our whiskey that was not made by us, but was matured by us, and sell it. The day that we got the barrels in, the Indiana state legislature came back to us and said that anything that went in your bottle had to be 60% yours. Right? So me being a young distiller, me being a young distiller and being like, we can't bottle that on its own anymore, and it's $100,000 worth of bourbon, was one of the scariest moments of my life. Because that now means that we have to at least set on this bourbon for 2 years to be able to blend it with our own straight bourbon. And so what we did is we basically took the same mash bill, let's say 70% corn, 20 wheat, 10% malt. We switched out the traditional malt for caramel malt. We double pot distilled it. It was then aged in number 2 charred oak barrels, medium plus toast for the heads. We then blended 60% our 2-year-old with 40% Wyoming. It got a really good rating in Whiskey Advocate. It got a lot of very positive early reviews, right? But the truth of the matter is, when I taste that whiskey to this day, and this is why it will never be reproduced one way or the other, and most people don't pick up on this, but as a distiller, I can taste the break between the column still and the pot still whiskey.
Wow. That's crazy. That just shows your skill.
That
So
bottle more
me,
than any.
So you're telling me, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you tell me if I'm right. So the front end is caramely and a little bit, there's a little corn and there's some caramel, some corn sweetness, okay? And then it goes to the back end of your palate and it becomes a little bit, I would say there's a little bit of ethanol mixed with a little bit of oak, and it's not sweet. So is that the break?
Yes. Yes,
So
100%.
Okay. Because that's what I get. I get such front end sweetness, and then you expect it to do what a weeder does, and it's smooth, but what as it breaks, the finish is kind of a little bit bitter. But it's not what you would expect from the front end on your palate, because usually if you get a sweet front end palate, you get a little bit of spice, and then you'll pick up a flavor, but you're just picking up a lot of a little bit of oak and a little bit of ethanol on like the finish aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's where those two whiskeys break at, right? And you can blend successfully, and we certainly potentially could have done a better job. Now, granted, the appeal of that to the market in general seemed to work, but that bottle will always bother me, because maybe it's psychological because it's not all mine, right? But I think if you can pick up on that, then I think most people can, right?
Not most people, no, because not most. I mean, when you're talking about most people are not looking. I mean, the percentage of people that we deal with, but like you talk about, like the Kentucky, like most people fucking walk in and they buy Jack Daniels or Jim Beam, and that's it. They're not.
Yeah, they're not looking for the fall.
So when you start convincing, what the huge market that I really think that's going to come with the craft distillers, and which has been helping, is the women's market, because most women are not, they fucking were turned off by Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. You don't find a lot of women, you maybe Christy would fucking do Jim Beam shots with you, but there's not a lot of women like her. You know what I mean? She understands her palate and everything, but she still will fucking push back probably anything, I think, based off of meeting her and doing. But overall, women, that market is so huge right now because they're so enthralled in wine, but they understand their palates. And then when you turn them on, like the few tastings I've done with couples, the women are all like drinking wine before, and the guys are like all into bourbon. But when you start telling them they love high proof, by the time you're finished, the women are way more fucking interested in the bourbon because they fucking loved it than the guys ever were.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Huge market that's going to drive people with the palate aspect, of what. Now there's some people that have limited palates that are always searching, but there's still that general population that when I go on Wednesdays to see what they got a case of this, they got a case of that, they got a case of this, okay? The high end stuff, whatever. But then they've got 12 cases of Jack Daniels and 8 cases of Jim Beam back there and like 35 cases of Tito's.
Right.
It's like, it's a bourbon boom, but it still doesn't even come close to what clear spirits sell. I mean, the clear spirits are now 80% and 20, where they used to own 95% of it.
Right. Right. Well, and that's actually one of the interesting things with the weeder, for example. So we released that at the same time that we released the 2-year-old Lee Sinclair. And one of the guys that used to be involved in the distillery would have argued that Lee Sinclair at 2 years did what it did because women want a sweeter spirit. I don't think that's true. What I think is that women could taste something in that Lee Sinclair 2-year-old that 90+% of men couldn't pick up on. Now they can pick up on it when it gets to 4 years old, but the Lee Sinclair whipped the Weeder's ass to such an extent that I don't even have a bottle of the 2-year-old Lee Sinclair. Right?
Well,
it's been discontinued now.
mhm.
And probably we should bring it back and do something with it, but we won't. I mean, it literally, you could put Lee and the Weeder in front of a woman and a man, and the man 90% of the time is going to go for that Weeder, and the woman's 90% of the time going to go for the Lee Sinclair. And again, I don't think it has anything to do with the sweetness. It's the perception of flavor that women have and the way they're now driving the industry.
Well, for instance, what Bill Hockett, I got to taste some of what he's put down, and so did Xavier here, and it was 9 months old.
Mm-hmm.
It was already, in my opinion, you could fucking sell it and not get ripped on. That's so if you put the right shit in the barrel. But now I will have to say is that after when I first started out, and the first samples you ever sent us up was the Lee Sinclair 2-year, and then we got the bottled and bond the next year, and the 2-year for me opened up different bourbons, like that bourbon didn't have to taste like what bourbon was. You were told what bourbon was tasted like. So there was an aspect of the grain. There was some yeasty bread, fresh baked bread aspects to it that matured when you went to the bottled and bond, where you got a little bit more caramel. So now you're looking like more like a cinnamon bun. You get that yeast, but you get that, and that becomes more what you expect in a classic bourbon. You know what I mean? You're getting the grain, but you're also getting the what was there. Whereas the 2-year was pretty much like you were making bread with bread dough and yeast and bread, and that's what was there with just maybe a little bit of caramel. But I have to say that opened up an aspect where I felt like what you were doing was still bourbon, and you still can get equally fucked up, but it didn't taste young to me, because I've tasted some young bourbons, and that's not what young bourbon tasted like. You had a lot more grain.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's maybe that's the fun of the whole thing, is that's the difference between with a young distillery, sourcing and blending versus here's 100% what the vision actually was, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that Weeder. It's just a very different style to everything we've done since then.
But as a distiller, that's something you have to actually accept, because that's one thing that's so fantastic about distilling, is because in the end, it's like you just wish you could put down and whatever, and you come out with the same taste in every single fucking barrel, and it wasn't a hard thing. But like you said with Freddie and Fred, you gotta respect, because as they're tasting 10,000 barrels mixed together, and they have to have in their memory what their goal is, so that those people have that consistency. But so much stuff like lately has been tasting so much better. I just think that the climate is getting better in Kentucky, Indiana, Wisconsin, and even Ohio, where it's getting warmer, so that the bourbons are actually starting to fucking take advantage, in other words, of global warming. You hear all about, but that's a good thing for the Midwest as far as making bourbon. And then it's also a good thing for Kentucky, because their shit even gets more caramely with the hotter winter, and they still get enough winter.
So
I'll throw this out there for you, and I think you'll enjoy this. So, another controversial moment when it comes to me in Indiana, at the very least. So, 2 states that I think are really, really where they need to be at to position themselves in the global marketplace: Colorado and Texas, which is fucking cool. Okay, it's cool, And I know Texas whiskey is not for everybody. I get it. I understand
100%.
100%.
Neither is Old Elk. I mean, they have put out some shit, in my opinion.
Yes.
It's so bland. It's blander than Willet.
You're not wrong. But let's take for example, Deerhammer, Lenny Eckstein, and Todd Leopold at the very least. 291, right? Those guys are not doing anything wrong. It's very distinctly Colorado whiskey. The same thing with Texas. Texas obviously is driven by heat. It's driven by barrel. But goddamn, there are so many good whiskeys that you can find in Texas if you look for them, right? Ranger Creek, right? Iron Root Republic, that's another great one, right? I'm not huge on Garrison Brothers, but people do like it, okay?
Yeah.
So it's cool to see those grow. Now, at the same time, here's the controversial part. Being an Indiana boy, being on the wrong side of the river, similar to Ohio, and having the same distilling history as Kentucky, just as Ohio has, that people have forgotten, there's a little piece of me that goes, when people ask how many craft distilleries there are in the state of Indiana, there's 37 of us. Then when people follow that question up with how many of them do you take seriously, and I say 4, right?
Right.
There's 4 of us in what was at one point in time trading places with Indiana and Illinois as the top distilling state in the United States. Why the fuck are Colorado and Texas whipping our ass? I need the other 30 plus distilleries in the state of Indiana to stand up and go, no, fuck that. We know what we're doing, right? We know how to do this. We can do it and we will do it. But until I start seeing their names being taken seriously, I have a hard time taking my own state seriously.
But what's really fucked up about it is that it's not just like being an artist. You have to be able to have the whole package. And that's one thing that I'll say it, and I really think that when Spirit of French Lick let Jolie go, there's an aspect of promotion that a craft distillery has to do. They have to fucking be able to deal with the distributors. One, if you can't, you're fucked. But then you have to be able to brand yourself something. And like what you've done with the Spirit of French Lick is branded yourself. You've put a brand on the Spirit of French Lick, that there's an aspect of fucking moonshining, distilling, love of passion of what you're putting out, and that comes across by what you and Jolie set up and what you continue to set up. And that's something that needs, it's just like with with my fucking, with the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, I have to fucking work my ass off on social media to drive fucking people to YouTube or drive them to Apple Podcasts so that eventually my fucking algorithm gets included because I've driven enough people. It's the same thing with whiskey. You have to drive enough people, and then eventually it catches on, the marketing, and you got to keep up your marketing, but it's going to catch on and you won't have a problem selling your product. But if you're not willing to do all of it, because it's all important, you're not fucking going to take it any step forward. You can make the best fucking whiskey there ever fucking was. And if you can't fucking market it and you have no skills to distribute it, who the fuck cares, right?
No. You are 100,000% absolutely correct. And
even
that's literally that's live or die stuff, literally, Jeff Muller, when it comes to a craft distillery, because when it comes down to it, a craft brand can't rely on the big dollars and the good name of the brand over 100 years. A craft distiller has to rely upon the personalities and the relationships that are created. Okay. And so just moments of honesty here for people who are listening. It's not easy. It's not always fun. It's a pain in the ass, right? I literally can tell you that in the past 6.5 years at Spirits of French Lick, there's been a lot of ups and downs, like a roller coaster, right? I literally remember a moment, let's say 3 years in, sitting outside, smoking a cigarette on a break and thinking, this is not going anywhere because the people that I work for have no understanding of the alcohol industry. And I literally remember having to build myself back up to being excited that I was doing this for a living, which no one who's in the industry who loves whiskey and distilling, brandy, whatever, should ever have to go through. And the first moment after 3 years that I got excited was the moment that they hired a salesperson in the name of Sean White. And they hired Sean White, and Sean came in, and he was literally like a breath of fresh air. He was like, man, it's going to be okay. You make good whiskey. I can market this. I can do something with it, right? I worked with him for a year. They then brought in, we had a marketing lady I'd been friends with for years before I ever worked at Spirits of French Lick, but she didn't understand the liquor industry whatsoever. And so everything every day was a struggle with her, trying to explain to her, we need to do this, we need to do that. I'm much better at ideas than I am at implementing ideas sometimes, right? And so every day I'd go to her, and every day it was a little bit of heartbreak, a little bit of coming back going, fuck, she doesn't understand what I'm saying. They hired in Jolie. And honestly, I've said this before, and Jolie said it before, I didn't get along with her. I thought legitimately she was the biggest bitch I ever met the first day I ever fucking met her. And I fucking love that woman more than I can ever explain in words to this day. Right. And once we got past our bullshit, whatever her preconceived notions and my preconceived notions were, then I was like, well, goddamn, now I have legitimately a sales dude who has worked in the bigger industry for great big distribution companies. And I've got a marketing lady who, even though she's new to the industry, she's put herself in the middle of all this. She understands all of it. She's researching all of it. She doesn't know everything yet, but she's learning as she goes. That got me excited as a distiller, right? And then that's the moment in time where Spirits of French Lick starts reaching out. Listen, you got a podcast? Reach out to me. I'll be on your podcast. You got a tasting and you've got a bourbon club and there's 9 people in it and it's in your basement. I'm fucking there on Saturday night, 2.5 hours away. I don't give a shit what the fuck I got going on. That's exciting, cool fucking shit, right? But what egged it on was having 2 people on the team who were coming up to me on Monday morning going, dude, I know that your Saturday was lost. I know you spent 2.5 hours driving there and 2.5 hours back, and you spent 4 hours there, but you got 9 people now that are now advocates for your fucking brand, right? And they're behind your brand and they love your brand because you came there and you ate their wife's venison chili, right? And you hung out and you talked about the product. But if you don't have that fucking team, I'm not sure how much of it matters, as you just said, right? Now, I will say this. It sucks that Spirits of French Lick lost Jolie, and Jolie's at a new place and she's doing new cool shit, and I support that 100,000,000%. Spirits of French Lick lost their salesperson, and it sucks. He got a better job, but he's doing what he does. He still helps us out, right? He helps me out. And he does call me from time to time and say, hey, lift your head up and do your shit and get your job done. And these are normal ups and downs of industry, obviously. But we do have a new salesperson, a new marketing person, and they are pushing those things. And there's a little bit more of that camaraderie coming around. These are normal ups and downs again. But I will tell you that if a craft distillery does not have those things, and a craft distiller that is supposed to be the face of those things and the inspiration and the voice behind those things, if they don't have that person just pushing the fuck out of them, get it, go do your thing, right? If you don't have that and you're a craft distillery and your brand is made out of personality, it not only becomes very hard for the company, it becomes very hard for the distiller and the quote unquote face of that company. If they don't have those people behind them to push them towards, Monday doesn't have to be the worst fucking day of the week, right, boys? It can be a great day of the week if somebody's there to fucking push you into it being a great day.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
It's like it just comes down to the people that you work with. But one thing that the craft distillers do have to go through is exactly what you said. You lose the people because you're a craft distiller, and when those people are good, they're going to go other places because they're good. But or whatever, or the ownership doesn't understand their value. There's lots of different things, but once again, the key to any distillery, the number one thing is producing good alcohol, and then everything else has to fall in place to sell that. Once again, you could, but the last thing I want to say is that even moonshiners, when they're moving their product, if their product was shit and people didn't like it, nobody's moving that nobody's going to drink that. I had a guy at work that put up his own still, produced moonshine, and everybody was buying it, but all of a sudden one day it got cold and it froze. And
ain't good.
No one fucking bought it after that because he's producing shit that had too much fucking water.
Let me tell you, as a former moonshiner, that's a phone call that you don't want from somebody who's pissed off that your shit froze.
Fucking moonshine froze at 28 degrees.
Right. Well, and the only other thing I'd say about craft distilling is this and this is just distilling in general, and for a lot of people, especially in the culture we live in, where distilling is popular and people want to make it because it's almost like being the next rock star or what the fuck ever, right? For whatever reasons that exists. Regardless of whatever your team is, regardless of whatever your background is, regardless of who's been there, who's no longer there, etc. If you don't wake up every morning as a distiller and go, even sometimes work sucks, right? If you don't wake up every morning and go, I'm going to go do the best I fucking can. I'm going to go make some shit that's going to turn heads. I'm going to go talk shit on the internet about the shit that I make to get your fucking attention. I'm going to tell you that you're fucking wrong about the things that you think you know because you're not a producer. You're probably in the wrong fucking industry. I literally wake up every morning feeling lucky as fuck that I get to put my fucking pants on right side out, just like every other fucking God-fearing American, and shit in a bowl of clean drinking water, get in my car and drive to fucking work. And what do I get to do for a living? I get to make whiskey. I get to make a product which I am proud of, which represents the heritage of not only my family, but also the place where I'm from. And if I'm lucky, it's good. You go home and you taste it. And maybe on a Friday night, you come home and regardless of your circumstance, and let's take the worst possible circumstance we can, right? As human beings, as living organisms on this fucking planet, maybe you lost somebody. A lot of people lost people in the past 2 years, right? Maybe something went wrong in life and people passed away, and life is hard in that moment. And if my whiskey can be a part of that moment where you can open a door that ordinarily your consciousness could not open, and you can have a moment that you would not ordinarily be vulnerable enough to have, and you can go into some self-healing spiritual realm that helps you get through whatever moment you're having at that point in time. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only thing I'm talented enough to do, and that's fucking good enough. That's cool shit.
I 100% agree. Yeah. And that's what your love of this industry is, and it talks through your whiskey. There's no doubt when you're drinking that. But now, with that said, that was fantastic. That was a fucking awesome moment. Thank you. But we want to talk about the absinthe because we got this set up. We'll finish up with this. This is the Fascination Street. We got it in there. We're gonna.
There's something we got to do. What he just said, you've got to take that whole soliloquy that he just recited, and it's got to be put on it's got to become part of the labeling of his bottles.
Yeah, that one.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, you put that. You can just watch this over and over.
Condense it slightly, but preserve the essence of it to where it flows.
That would be
and you stick that on your bottles. That's too priceless to just let go off into cyberspace and not do anything with.
Or make a special whiskey that has that fucking on it.
Yeah, you've got to have that on your bottle.
That's fucking amazing.
My God, you got to have that on your bottle.
Here's my marketing 101, and Jolie would tell me I'm wrong and she would fix this. But what you would do is you would do a shirt, and what it would say is it would be just Alan Bishop is a motherfucker like 5 times in a row, just in text, then a quote, and then fuck this guy 5 times in text at the bottom, right? So that it's never taken too seriously.
Yeah, like she was.
But I'm
like
telling
she
you, that's
said when you were doing Iconoclast and you were telling everybody that it was $2,000 on the secondary market, and she called you up and said, "What the fuck are you doing?"
When we did that Unpretentious, I will never forget the greatest moment of my career.
Unpretentious, yes, sorry.
Oh, you're good. And we'll wrap this up with Absinthe. But the greatest moment of my career thus far, out of everything cool I've done, getting to sit down and drink my bourbon with Jimmy Russell was a pretty cool moment, right? That was awesome. Even if we're night and day different from one another, that was cool stuff. The greatest moment of my career, and I will never forget this, is I made those posts about Unpretentious on the secondary market, and it started off, day one it was $500. Day 2, I went to the bottle was $1,200 and a shot was $250. Day 3, I went to the bottle was $5,000, a shot was $500.
Yep.
There were people, I will never forget this. I walked through the office, and there were people that had called the tasting room, and they said, "Is a shot of this Unpretentious really $500?" And I'll never forget this. There were employees that worked in the tasting room going, "Are we really charging $500 a shot for this?" Just people were asking,
but
and
see,
I was like, "Motherfucker! If I control that, I control anything."
Yes, but at the same time, if anybody ever fucking knew you, you knew 100% that it would be like you would rather fucking die than sell a shot for $500 fucking dollars.
Right?
That you want to sell $500 a shot whiskey to people for $12.
Now,
Or
let me tell you,
$10.
here's where humility comes into play, boys. So I just made fun of Sazerac, and we just talked about all that stuff, right? And what people pay for products and this, and that, and the other. If I owned a piece of a company and I thought for 1 minute that there was one product, even if I thought it was ridiculous, that I could make $500 a shot off of, put me in fucking line number 1. I will sign off on that fucking shit. I'll be driving a fucking A1 fucking Tesla so fast it'll make your fucking head spin, and I'll still sell you good whiskey at a reasonable price that ain't $500 a shot.
Right, you'll sell everybody else the whiskey almost exactly the same, but that other, you're on board for the people who can afford $500 a shot too.
Yes. So Absinthe, where are we going with this?
We got Fascination Street in there, and we're gonna do the old fashioned loosing, even though it's a little bit lower proof than whatever. But let's just do it. I'm gonna start.
Yeah, it'll cloud a little bit.
We're gonna not drift. We're gonna do the Bohemian method.
Yep.
Nice. It'll cloud a little bit on you. It's not gonna cloud real dark, but you're gonna get some fantastic caramel flavors off of that. And that licorice flavor is going to come way to the forefront. So, for those who don't know, who've not had Fascination Street, there is still some available at the distillery because, as you can imagine, Indiana is not the greatest market for absinthe of all fucking time. This particular absinthe is something that I don't know that anyone has ever done. If somebody can show me some historic example of this, I'll be glad to admit that somebody beat me to it. But what we did was we took absinthe and we actually matured it in a new American oak charred barrel, not a used oak, new American number 2 char, medium plus toast. And the idea was, being a company that is based in the wine industry, I wanted to create an absinthe that had a little bit of a digestive characteristic. A little bit more roundness, a little bit more of a dessert wine, a little bit more in common with bourbon, because in America, you have bourbon drinkers and everyone else, right? And absinthe drinkers, for example, very rarely cross over with bourbon drinkers, and bourbon drinkers really never cross over with absinthe drinkers. So what's the middle ground? The middle ground is an absinthe that is a base including 20% oat whiskey at 100% oats into a new American oak barrel at a lower proof, 106, 107. I can't remember what that was off the top of my head. But something that a bourbon drinker can drink a shot of, a drink of, set and enjoy after dinner as a digestif or almost as a dessert wine, and enjoy in a way they wouldn't normally think of absinthe. And so that's what we tried to do with Fascination Street. That particular absinthe, like many of the things that we do, one-offs, is named after something that inspired me. Music inspires me greatly. That is named after the Cure song Fascination Street, particularly the line, waiting for you to kick the last nail in. And that's exactly, to me, what absinthe feels like. You're asking for something almost emotionally devastating to happen to you when you drink absinthe.
I like it. I definitely like it straight, just because it's 100 and what was it? 104? What is it? What's the proof on it?
104, 106, somewhere in there.
You know what proof it is. It's probably 106. I'll go with it's 106. Yeah. So, but we were drinking absinthes that were like 150.
Well, that's
74.
Yeah,
it was 74 ABV.
Yeah.
So you're looking at somewhere in the 120s, but this at 106. You don't have to add the water and do the sugar. We just wanted to see. I've had it right out of the bottle, and it's definitely drinkable at 106 straight. But adding a little bit of water opens up a lot of flavor to it, and then definitely adding a sugar cube changes it a lot too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a very Americanized absinthe. It starts with our Swiss Le Bleu style, which is a little lighter than most traditional absinthes, and then goes again into that new American oak barrel, number 2 char, medium plus toast, to get a little more of that bourbon tonality to it. And the goal here was, again, to sort of draw bourbon drinkers into absinthe, right, and absinthe drinkers into bourbon. And so it's not a traditional absinthe in the way that you might think of absinthe. It's definitely its own category. It's its own Americanized, bastardized thing in a lot of ways. So,
well, there's no doubt. What I do think that's different from the normal absinthes is the caramelization. You pick up a little bit of caramel, and with the licorice. And
the licorice isn't quite as overpowering.
Right. So there's that there's definitely the caramel in there. And that's something that you're not going to get through traditional absinthe because of they're not aging it in charred oak barrels. So you're not getting that.
Right.
But so I know you've really, really been studying absinthe. So what is your next, project? Are you coming out with more absinthe?
Yes, not necessarily through Spirits of French Lick, but so absinthe is legitimately my distilling passions. Absinthe and apple brandy are at the top of the list. There's a number of other things not quite so easily categorized as what those two are, but so I did the Death in the Afternoon absinthe, which I did with Key West Trading Company. So the two absinthes that you'll get through Spirits of French Lick, they are a little lighter in style than traditional absinthes, because 6 years ago, if you were to introduce a true Swiss style or even a Verde or French style absinthe into the Midwest, people would have rejected it outright. Maybe 1 out of 10 people.
They would have done that, right?
Right. Maybe 1 out of 10 people really like that anise flavor, right? That has started to change a little bit as people have gotten more open-minded towards different spirits. It's a little easier in places like Key West. And again, working with Key West Trading Company, doing the Death in the Afternoon, that is, in my mind and in my opinion, the closest thing that you're going to get to a true French Verde style absinthe in the United States of America. Now, there are 2 other variations on that particular absinthe that they have not released yet that I did prototype for them and have sold them. There is a amethyst absinthe, which I do have plans for in the future on my own. It's a little bit different.
Explain that. Is aged in amethyst?
Amethyst, yes. So it kind of starts with what you're tasting right now. So the barrel aged absinthe that you're tasting, Fascination Street, we actually filtered that through amethyst crystals, and you can find a video of that on my Facebook page. I am not claiming in any way, shape, or form that those amethyst crystals did anything to that absinthe, right? Whatever they may or may not have done is tied into the mysticism of absinthe in general. It's in your own mind. It's worth whatever your own opinion of it is.
Okay.
The step beyond that is, as opposed to coloring an absinthe green using traditional botanicals such as petite wormwood, lemon balm, and hyssop, what if you were to do a very Americanized absinthe and color it using a purple corn variety?
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're actually adding in raw purple corn kernels and extracting the color of those corn kernels into the absinthe, including the flavor of the amino acid anthocyanin, right? So you've taken the old world thing and introduced it into new world agriculture.
So
to where you have something.
So after it's distilled, you add the corn kernels, or do you then
Yes.
do you redistill it?
Yes.
Nope.
No,
We just
You're just getting you're not looking for the distilled aspect of the corn. You're looking for the color and the flavor that it will distribute.
So we're looking for the purple color, which is associated with the anthocyanin, which is an amino acid, which has very particular flavors associated with it, including blackberries and blueberries. And also the starch of the raw corn, which comes through in the flavor profile.
But do you cook it, or do you just throw the kernels in?
All right. So very rarely do I say there's a trade secret, but I'll break this one. You heat the raw white absinthe to 145 degrees, and then you add the corn to that to extract the flavor.
And then once it cools, you filter out the kernels. And
don't. I'm just asking this question. Don't some absinthe producers, when they add the botanicals, then it's redistilled?
Well, that's like a gin
uniqueness
basket, right? That's how you add the botanicals initially, right? Like what we did when we were distilling in Indiana.
So you guys are going down a very interesting road here, and just to clear up some misconceptions about absinthe, because there are a lot of absinthes, quote unquote, being produced right now that don't really fall into the classic definition of what an absinthe is. Okay. So traditionally, what would happen is, if you're going to do a colored verde absinthe, you would take most of your botanicals, short of petite wormwood, hyssop, and lemon balm, which are almost always considered coloring agents. You would macerate those particular botanicals in either low wine or double distilled spirit at 145 degrees for 1 hour, and then redistill. That's going to give you the flavor of the absinthe, but that's going to give you a white spirit. After that white spirit is run off, you're going to take 45 to 48% of it and heat it back up to 145. And then you're going to take your coloring agents and place them into that like a tea bag for 45 minutes to 1 hour and extract the color and the flavor of hyssop, petite wormwood, and lemon balm, or in this case, purple corn, right?
Right.
At that point, you're then going to filter that coloring agent out of that absinthe and add the colored absinthe back to the white absinthe. And now you're going to have a colored absinthe. It's a very, it's a giant pain in the ass is what
and
it
it's
is.
also, it's art. It's fucking art. Now, there are some absinthes that are, I think, what is it, Norwegian descent, where they fucking just throw green food coloring in.
Yeah, you'll find
they're like fucking lime, like fluorescent green.
You'll find a ton of old Soviet bloc absinthes from the early 2000s that they definitely cheated on. A lot of times they're using artificial oils and then coloring with food coloring to get this impression of what absinthe is. And unfortunately, if you guys remember back in like 2007 or so, there were a lot of absinthes on the market and they were really bad. And that's literally what they are, what they were. They were GNS with artificial oils and artificial colors and all that stuff. Yeah,
I remember. There was a lot of fluorescent absinthes out there. I really think what Ted is his name that
Ted Bro, yeah.
I mean, he basically legitimized absinthe back in. He was like responsible for changing the law, but then what he produced with Jade and everything, I really think he brought absinthe back to the mainstream. He worked his ass off to do that.
He 100% did. And for those that are listening, if you think that you don't like absinthe, I would suggest if you can find a bottle of Jade Edouard. The Edouard is by far the most accessible absinthe to people who think they don't like absinthe. It's very sweet. It's very rounded. Even if you're not a fan of licorice in particular, if you're a fan of root beer, you can find something you like in absinthe. And the two very easy ways to consume absinthe, and they're not traditional either one, are either throw it into a little eggnog, which is really good, or throw it into a little bit of root beer.
That's so you've had my Scotchy Bourbon Balls, right?
Yes, sir.
You know that I make them strong. I had a woman who bought them and said that they weren't strong enough. So what she did is dip them in eggnog, homemade eggnog with brandy and Jim Beam bourbon, dip them in that eggnog, and then they were strong enough for her. And I'm like, holy shit, girl. I mean, you must not like anything produced for, nothing produced for the general market. You know what I mean? Because they just have to have it way watered down. But she told me to try it, so I can't wait till next year when I get my wife to make some homemade eggnog. I'm going to be dipping my bourbon balls in there.
Interesting. This is a great
one of the really cool things that I thought about the documentary that we did with Bo. So we had obviously our bourbon friends like you guys up, and we had our moonshine friends like some of the guys from Hell's Half.
What happened? Oh, we just lost him. All right, I think we just. Oh, here he comes back. He's coming back. Boom.
Yeah.
You're there now, but
we
don't got your audio. I think when you moved out of that room, you lost your connection. I got your audio, but I don't get your video.
Okay, hold on just a second.
We got it. It says The Alchemist.
The Alchemist.
Alchemist.
Mm-hmm. Still no video. What the
No
fuck?
video. I might be able to help. Let's see. Come on. I got to think what I got to do. All right, there we go. I'm gonna go. Stop. Nope. Mm-mm. You're there, but no video.
I think that's just
Interesting.
Well, you can keep talking.
Yeah. All right. So one of the really cool things that happened at the filming with Bo Cumberland is so we had our bourbon friends like you guys, right? And then I also had some of my moonshine friends, people from Hell's Half Acre. And so you brought the bourbon balls, and a good friend of ours, Shauna Courtney Bell, brought moonshine balls, right?
Yep.
Now, one of the really neat things about that you may or may not know is that those moonshine balls that Shauna made were actually made out of more or less the raw moonshine type spirit of what Lee Sinclair was back in the day.
Okay.
So it was kind of cool to see sort of the contrast between that more commercial leaning ingredient versus the raw home ingredient, right? And see the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's a difference.
Right. Yeah. Hers were super fucking hot, but they were good. Right. They were just, it was different things. She also, I don't know if she told you or not. Did you talk to her any about the production process on that?
No, I didn't get to.
So she actually soaked those walnuts for her bourbon balls in that moonshine for over a year in the refrigerator.
So a year. So she's
A year.
The bourbon balls, that was 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got to remember what it was. It was one of the major bottled in bonds. It's like, right. I find that 100 proof bottled in bond, but the longer you soak the pecans, because I use pecans, the better the quality is. This year, when we now the average person doesn't pick up on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have a lot to compare to. So if they're comparing to legal bourbon balls that people have to abide by the rules to mass produce and sell it at all the distilleries, the bourbon balls that I produce have enough bourbon that in them, and then we tried to perfect the balance between the filling and the chocolate, right?
Right.
So I find right about 4 months is perfect. When we were being pushed this past season to produce more bourbon balls, the least amount was 2 weeks. And then I had 2 batches at 4 months. I had another batch at 2 months, and then I had another 3 batches at 2 weeks because we did not expect the demand. But
right.
2 weeks is the minimal. If we tried 1 batch at a week, which Maker's Mark suggests, and it just didn't work, right. After tasting the other one. But the longer it soaks, the better it is. So 1 year, that's fantastic. But how the fuck are you going to produce any product at any level when you're waiting a year for?
Oh, absolutely.
The walnuts,
absolutely.
And then I do like pecans over walnuts. We've done walnuts and cashews and pecans still. The best batch we've made is if we have, because what happens to the cashews is they liquefy. The walnuts are bitter. They add a bitter aspect to it. And the pecans are sweet. But we did this walnut cashew mix. Not a walnut cashew, but a pecan cashew mix. And that seemed to be what we're going to lean towards, right. What we do next year when we start to have to. The holidays, always people are ordering left and right.
Well, she didn't leave the walnuts in there for a year on purpose. It was totally, she forgot about it in the back of the refrigerator.
No, it's the same thing. When I first was doing it, I was doing it for two weeks to a month, but then COVID hit and I let it sit for, it was hitting in like March when everything closed down. And I'm like, I'm not making bourbon balls so I let it sit all the way March, April, May, June, July, August. So 6 months before we even considered actually being able to make some bourbon balls. And all of a sudden we were like, well, the longer you let it sit, it obviously increases the better taste. But 2 weeks is the least amount you can do it. You have to at least let it sit for 2 weeks. Otherwise, they just start to like go to shit.
Well, yours are by far the best bourbon balls I've ever had. And you guys will enjoy this. And this might be a nice little ending note for you. So hating the industry the way I do and loving my friends in the industry the way I do and getting together with you guys and doing this documentary and all that stuff and getting to hang out with people that I actually like and enjoy spending time with. Let me tell you what the downside of that is, which there's an upside to the downside. The downside is waking up at 1:00 in the afternoon on Sunday and going, motherfucker, I've got to clean up all that fucking shit and go to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that your bourbon balls and Shauna's moonshine balls kept me from having a ridiculous hangover and made it a manageable hangover. Cleaned up the amount of bullshit that we accumulated in 12 hours worth of filming. But there's nothing worse and nothing more lonely than being hungover on a Sunday in the woods while it's fucking cold, cleaning up fucking shit from a party, from a documentary you have yet to see, and just surviving off bourbon balls like some lonely fucking George Jones fucking song.
I got the text message or the Facebook message from Kim that your daughter, she's like, those are not kid friendly.
Right. Yeah, she was all kinds of pissed that I was eating those things at the fucking kitchen table. She came in there and she goes, "Can I have one of those?" I was like, "No, you can't." She goes, "Why not?" And I said, "Because they got bourbon in them." She goes, "I've tasted bourbon before. It'll be okay." Right. She's 6 years old. I'm like, yeah, here's the Father of the Year award right here.
I got lucky because my granddaughter who lives with us is 5, and she basically at 3 had an episode at the bookstore where she just ran into the bookstore and for whatever reason got the stomach flu and barfed all over the bookstore. So she hates barfing. So if you tell her anything will make her barf, she will never touch it. So she understands bourbon makes you barf.
That might be a plus. That could be a plus.
So she's got that down. So when she says, she's always like, "Are those alcoholic?"
Well, I will say this. One of the great pleasures of my life was getting to hang out with people that I really like and I really enjoy and getting to do these things that the industry that I so much claim to hate gives me the opportunity to meet these people that I now consider family, like you guys. My daughter, she is the best about reminding me that how lucky we are, because she'll say things like, "Well, I haven't heard from Aunt Jolie for a while," right? Or I've not seen Uncle Mike or Uncle Benji or whatever, Uncle Kevin or Uncle Max, who I worked with at Copper and Kings, right? She grew up with it, and it's a part of her life. And should she so choose, and it's her choice, obviously, to go into this industry, she's going to have so many opportunities from the people who we've become friends with and become more than just industry associates with, who care about what she may do in the future. And that's cool.
Yeah. And there's the women in bourbon, the bourbon industry, and the women who are distilling are so fantastic that she would be welcomed, but like you said, she has to choose it. Everybody has to choose their own path. Yeah.
Yeah. There's, one other thing I wanted to tell you guys about that I thought you might think is neat and maybe listeners might think is cool. I'm not going to say her name because I'm not sure that it's kosher to say this, but I went to school obviously in the middle of nowhere, and people think that hillbillies are just dumb nobodies, whatever. But I went to school with a lot of very talented, very smart people, and one of the things that I'm very excited about is I went to school with a woman who is just a little older than I am, who is legitimately on the short list for Mars. Whoever decides they're going to Mars first, she's on that ship. And she's been training for this for years and years and years, lives in New Zealand nowadays. But the long and short of it is that she's got a bunch of little mini keychain barrels full of Lee Sinclair.
Excellent.
Nice.
And if she leaves for Mars tomorrow, you know what's going with her? Lee Sinclair.
Lee Sinclair.
That's
Now,
awesome.
now I'm kind of disappointed that you're not sending the William Dalton French stave, the French oak stave, fucking, because that should be going, because it's the best bourbon I've ever tasted.
Well, if we wanted to get real technical here and we wanted to go super white trash, grew up in a trailer park in the middle of nowhere, it ought to go. So 120 years from now, maybe people talk about Mars like it's the Wild West, like we do nowadays. I'd say Old Granddad 114 is probably the top of the list.
That's some damn good shit. There's no doubt.
Right.
It's like Old Granddad, even bottled in bond is okay, but the 114, it's just so fucking full of body. There's no doubt. It's just like, if you want an alien to fucking drink a bourbon, I agree.
You want to fight an alien, that's what you drink.
Hopefully we don't have to fight aliens because we'll get our asses kicked, right?
Mm-hmm. Did I ever tell you the abbreviation of Old Granddad is OGD, and that stands for two things: Old Granddad and Old Goddamn for the hangover tomorrow.
Yep. Oh goddamn it! There's no doubt. Yep. I every time someone mentions that, I see that, and I'm just like, what the fuck?
Right.
All right.
Somebody lost a Sunday.
All right. So thank you so much for your time and getting us fucked up. Yeah. And you were already going. So, but
it's been a pleasure, Alan. We really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, gentlemen. I always appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So remember, everybody, www.scotchybourbonboys.com. The website is working again after some technical difficulties, but check us out there. But also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. That takes us out. And also, please watch us when you're watching on your favorite podcast format. Make sure you leave really, really good feedback. If you don't like what you're watching, basically fuck you and don't leave feedback. So, all right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, a real quick aside, if you got a minute.
Yeah, I got a minute.
Yeah. Look, I'm fucking with your music. I fucked up your whole production.
No, not at all. We love you.
So, thank you, Jeff. So, for those who are still paying attention to this point, I would
2 fucking hours later, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I would
all
like
three of you out there.
Yes, all three of you who will message me and be like, "What's wrong with you?" The long and the short of it is, one thing I want to wrap up with: the Southern Indiana Distilling Complex is growing, hopefully in time to compete with Colorado and Texas. And my former cohort, Julie Kasperzak, apparently has a new project under her belt, which is within the 6-county region of the Black Forest. The old Black Forest with 155 plus distilleries between 1855 and 1914. So over in nearby Crawford County, people should be on the lookout for a new distillery called Old Homestead. And if you can get any information out of Julie Kasperzak, please let me know, because she won't tell me a fucking thing about anything that's going on over there whatsoever. And I would love to know what she's got up her sleeve to compete with me.
So would we, right? I'll see what I can do for you on that front.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you let me know. Let me know.
I will for sure.
All right, now this time we're really leaving.
All right, everybody remember, good bourbon equals good friends and good time, and go out there and live your fucking life dangerously.
Night, everyone.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you, I tell you, I tell you we must die.
All right, we're off that. You still there, Alan?
Oh yeah, I'm still here.
All right. I will stop recording on YouTube right.
The watershed story. A watershed moment might be pivotal, but it might also be quiet and fleeting. It could be a monumentous occasion, a cause for celebration, an enormous triumph, or a small daily victory. A watershed moment could be a rekindling or an observation or a gathering. Any opportunity to relish with friends and family. It's whatever you choose to cheers to, who you're gathered around, and whatever's worth celebrating. We founded Watershed Distillery on the principles of community in 2010. We wanted to live in, work in, and contribute to the community in which we grew up. We aimed to create spirits and stood apart in quality and character. Along the way, we set out to form a community of our own, one that could gather together to savor, celebrate, and enjoy good spirits and company. We've grown from a tiny little still and 2 guys in jumpsuits to a dedicated team of over 40 people and 2 much larger stills. If you're ever in the area, stop by so we can introduce you to our team and pour you some of our award-winning bourbon. Creating it was our watershed moment, but we want to hear about yours.